Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that literally affects every single one of us, the psychology of fear. We're going to break down the actual anatomy of home terror through three incredibly chilling, first-hand case studies of unexplained sounds in the night. We're going to look at exactly how our minds process a sudden, unexpected threat in the very places we're supposed to feel the safest.
You know that sound, right? When a house settles, it creaks. We all know that. But what happens in our brains when that random creak suddenly takes on the heavy, deliberate weight of a human footstep? Well, we're going to explore how our most primal fears get triggered when our safest spaces are violated, and it all starts with that creeping, chilling realization that, hey, we might not actually be alone.
Okay, let's jump straight into case study 1, the basement phantom. This is all about the supernatural fear.
So picture this. We've got an 18-year-old living completely alone with his dog, Jojo. To really get the psychological weight of what happens to him, we kind of need to understand the timeline of his Uncle Steve. See, Steve was this great father figure who stepped up after the narrator's own dad passed away. But as the years went on, his visits started to fade, eventually leading to this sudden, totally unresolved disappearance where he just wasn't seen for months. And that lingering mystery, it set the perfect psychological stage for a midnight encounter.
Now, the sensory details here are absolutely crucial. Imagine waking up in the dead of night to find your trusted old dog staring intensely down into a pitch-black basement. When he asks, "What is it, boy?" the dog's tail wags for a brief second, recognizing his owner, but then it goes completely, rigidly stiff as he looks back into the dark. Animals don't fake their instincts, right? A dog reacting like that instantly validates that the threat is real. It's not just your mind playing tricks on you.
And this right here is that absolute stomach drop moment. The guy, trying his best to be brave, walks halfway down those creaky, low-ceilinged basement steps and calls out into the void, "Is someone there?" And from the darkness, a voice actually replies, but it's not some random burglar. It is his Uncle Steve's voice, calling his name, sounding just horribly weak and injured. Obviously, he sprints upstairs, locks himself in his room, and calls his mom in a total panic.
But wait, it gets so much worse. The true horror hits when his mom drops an absolute bombshell over the phone. Uncle Steve had secretly died of cancer years ago. She'd been hiding it just to spare him the grief. So the police show up, they search the entire basement, and they find absolutely nothing. The reality of the situation transforms a potential intruder into an impossible phantom. But here is the kicker. Jojo the dog heard it too.
So that brings us to a huge question. A ghost in the basement is terrifying for sure. But how does our terror evolve when the creeping dread is completely physical? Like what happens when there is no ghost, but instead a tangible, breathing thread sharing your space? Which leads us to case study 2, the downstairs squatter, the physical fear. All right, put yourself in the shoes of this 24-year-old renting the upstairs of an old house. The first floor is locked up tight and supposedly completely empty. But then the dread starts to build. It doesn't happen all at once either. First, it's heavy, slow footsteps at 1 a.m. Then you hear a cabinet door shut downstairs. A door is found open by just an inch. You start smelling cigarette smoke. And when the renter finally calls the out-of-state landlord, the guy literally brushes it off as just old house noises. Yeah, right.
But then we get to the number 3. I mean, what would you actually do in this situation? You're lying completely still in your bed. The heavy footsteps stop right beneath you on the first floor, and then you hear exactly 3 distinct, deliberate taps against the floorboards right under your body. In that split second, the psychological barrier between safe upstairs and danger downstairs just evaporates. Whoever is down there is signaling that they know exactly where you are.
So, obviously he gets out of there, he comes back the next day with a buddy to investigate in the daylight, and boom, physical proof. His friend finds a hidden, fresh cigarette butt jammed right under the downstairs kitchen cabinet. Confronted with actual evidence, the landlord finally admits, oh yeah, a back window doesn't lock properly, and a thin person could totally force it open. The danger was 100% real.
And then the ultimate nightmare scenario happens. The renter goes back one last time to pack a bag, and he hears the undeniable, visceral sound of a human cough echoing straight up the stairs from the hallway. You literally cannot mistake that for a settling house. He instantly runs, calls the cops, and they end up finding fresh dirt on the windowsill and an unfamiliar blanket in the closet. The physical threat was confirmed. Okay, so we've looked at supernatural phantoms, we've looked at literal squatters, but what about right now, in our modern era?
We rely so heavily on smart devices to run our homes. So how does that fear mutate when an unseen intruder uses our own trusted technology against us?
Let's look at case study 3, the unplugged machine. We're calling this the uncanny fear.
So we have a 22-year-old named Chris. He's home totally alone while his brother is thousands of miles away. It all starts with a simple thud downstairs and rapidly descends into just sheer panic. Step 1, his smart speaker randomly starts playing this slow, dark song in the middle of the night. Step 2, Chris gets up and physically unplugs the thing from the wall. Step 3, he goes back to sleep, only to be jolted awake because the loud music is blasting again. And step 4, he creeps out into the living room and sees that the device has been physically plugged back in by an unseen hand.
Chris does what any of us would do. He locks himself in his room, desperately trying to cling to a logical assumption. Maybe it's a crazy hardware glitch. Maybe his brother came home early. But a quick text confirms his brother is definitively still in Mexico, which leaves only the absolute nightmare. A hostile intruder is standing silently in his dark living room.
He's pressed up against his locked bedroom door with a chair jammed under the handle, just listening. And then he hears it, the absolute worst sound imaginable. A quiet, crystal clear human whisper coming from the dark living room, telling the machine, "Alexa, play." And the music blasts again. He said later that his entire body just went numb. All the weight dropped out of him as the terrifying reality of what was happening really set in. At this point, pure panic takes over. He's screaming at the top of his lungs for the guy to get out while dialing 911. When the cops finally show up and sweep the place, they find the locked front door completely wide open. The house is totally empty. The horrifying realization is that someone had likely been squatting in the empty downstairs apartment and decided to intentionally creep upstairs that night just to psychologically mess with him. Talk about leaving a permanent mental scar. So let's wrap this up with the lingering fear, deconstructing home terror. When we take a step back and look at all three of these stories, the phantom, the squatter, and the smart speaker, it all boils down to this core concept: home invasion anxiety. Every single one of these narratives preys on that specific vulnerability. Our home is supposed to be our ultimate sanctuary, and these events take totally normal things and turn them into devastating violations of that safety. The boundaries just completely collapse. If you actually map out how these fear triggers escalate, a super clear pattern emerges. Our terror doesn't peak when the house just makes a random noise. It goes up a bit with a weird tech glitch, sure, but it absolutely skyrockets to maximum levels when human intention, or even just the illusion of it, is undeniably confirmed. That's the moment our psychology just shatters. So I'm going to leave you with this one final thought. The next time your house settles in the dead of night and you hear a floorboard groan out in the hallway, you really have to ask yourself, are you truly alone, or is someone just out there waiting for you to go back to sleep? Thank you guys so much for exploring the anatomy of home terror with me today. Keep your doors locked, and I'll see you in the next explainer.